Okay, good afternoon. I'm Diane Dungy. I'm the Senior Deputy Managing Editor and a representative of the Daily Herald Editorial Board. Today is Tuesday, September 8th, and we're pleased to begin a joint interview with candidates for the 5th Congressional District in the November 3rd election. I am joined by reporter Steve Zalewski and editorial board members John Lampinen, our editor, Pete Nenny, Jim Bauman, and Jim Slusher. We welcome the candidates, incumbent Mike Quigley and his Republican opponent, Republican Tommy Hanson. We have a half hour, and I ask that you keep your responses concise, please. Representative Quigley, we'll begin our questioning with you. Many say that this election is a referendum on the president. Is it? And if so, what rating would you give to President Trump? Representative Quigley, where do you agree with the president? And Mr. Hanson, where do you disagree with him? Mr. Quigley, if you could go first.
Sure. I don't believe it should be a referendum on the president, but I think the polling indicates that you're accurate, that it is. I think it's a particular indication, a referendum on his handling of the COVID and the economic downturn that resulted from this. And unfortunately, on both, he has failed us miserably. First, by forgetting the fact that this is a pandemic, a healthcare crisis that has created an economic crisis and not the other way around. And calling it a hoax, not instilling initially in full bore the Defense Production Act, not working to coordinate with our allies, not working to coordinate, communicate with state and local governments, making this instead a competition has really set us back a long way. We are still short on testing, and he appears that he wants to get past this without really affecting change. And unfortunately, that has failed the country.
Mr. Hanson?
Well, I think he's done an incredible job considering the fact that the Democrats just won't work with him. The fact of the matter is, when they learned about the COVID-19 crisis, he closed down China and Europe from coming into the US, and he immediately worked on getting a vaccine, and the vaccine is nearing around the corner. So the fact of the matter is, he's going as fast as a human being could go, especially the President of the United States. And the fact of the matter is that, of course, people want a vaccine. 40% of the US right now wants a vaccine, and a vaccine will be coming as fast as they can FDA clear it. And there will be many, many discoveries because of this vaccine, all kinds of medical discoveries because of this Herculean effort to create the vaccine. There might be discoveries to cure HIV or cancer or other things because of this effort to find the vaccine. So I support the president. I think he's doing a fantastic job.
Let me follow up on that. And Mr. Hanson, if you could go first this time. On the COVID-19 response, was it appropriate to leave decisions and strategies such as testing, mask wearing, and acquiring and distributing PPE in the hands of the state and local authorities? And
well, the president did the right job. He left it up to the states and the municipalities to take care of it on their own. He felt that the decision makers of the governors and the mayors in the states and the cities across America could make the right decisions. He wanted to start out that way, but eventually it got to a point where there's mass hysteria on COVID-19. You know, in the beginning of all this, they said that only half the country would get it. And last week, the CDC said that only half the country will get it, that half the country will not get it. They also said in the beginning that it would be worse than the regular flu, which comes every season. They said it would be 2, 3, 4%, whereas the flu is 1%. And right now, if you do the math in the US compared to the number of US deaths, or if you look at each state and you look at the deaths in each state, or the number of deaths in each city and the number of deaths in each city, the percentage is around 0.5% of the deaths. They've also found out during this effort to figure out how to find a vaccine that 94% of the people that are dying from COVID-19 have underlying illnesses, and that everything under the sun is being called COVID-19. If somebody has diabetes or cancer or a heart attack or whatever, if they get COVID-19, then they call it COVID-19. That's how they tag the death. The other 6%, those people are everyday walking around Americans that catch it, but that number right now is a little more than 10,000 people. So, you know, wearing masks and all that, it really isn't, in my opinion, that much of a threat when you look at the economic consequences of the fact that the economy has completely come to a halt in Chicago and Illinois, but in other parts of the country where they are not in phase 1, 2, 3, or 4. In fact, they don't wear masks anymore. They're doing fine and their economies are doing very well. So they're not.
Quigley, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I don't know where to begin. I mean, first of all, the answer sort of implies that if you have an underlying health issue, a comorbidity, then it doesn't really count. I mean, if anything, I think what the experts have told us is there's a dramatic undercount of who has gotten COVID and how many people have died as a result. And it implies also that we should care less about someone in a nursing home with diabetes and so forth, or some sort of hypertension. We should care all the more. And that's why wearing a mask and social distancing and all these other issues are so extraordinarily important. We're also hearing from, again, the experts that had we not quarantined, which obviously had a dramatic impact on the economy, move the decimal point over in terms of how many people would have got this and how many people would have died. And the earliest that any vaccine has been developed of note is probably about 4 years. And there's never been a particularly effective COVID vaccine. And on my desk are budgets from the president, which had cuts to CDC and NIH and research. And he has let this go 3.5, almost 4 months without a response to the HEROES Act, which we passed in the House to address additional care for those with the virus.
We have many more questions on COVID-19, but our time is short, and so I'm going to change the subject right now. And Representative Quigley, it's your turn to go first on this one. The president says that Joe Biden wants to abolish the suburbs. Should we in the suburbs be concerned about this?
Well, I grew up in Carroll Stream. I spent a lot of my time in DuPage County. I went to the College of DuPage. I do well in the suburbs. I like suburbs. It is a bizarre fear-mongering based on I don't know what, but the suburbs will do just fine, as will the rural areas and the cities under Joe Biden presidency.
Mr. Hanson?
Well, you're totally wrong about that. Right now, Illinois is $245 billion in debt in their pension funds, and Chicago is $45 billion in debt in their just debts alone. And the fact of the matter is, the suburbs don't want to be a part of Chicago's problem. Chicago has terrible schools. The city of Chicago needs public students to be going to their schools, and the president wants kids to have a choice. They want to take the money and go where they want to go to school rather than be stuck with these Chicago public schools. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get the suburbs to try to pay for Chicago's mistakes. This isn't, when I'm talking about this issue, I'm talking about Chicago and Illinois, which is totally separate from the rest of the country. The state of Illinois should go bankrupt right now, and so should the city of Chicago.
So under the state of, if you follow that logic, so should Kentucky. The person who runs the Senate state, they have their pension fund at 32%. Let's agree that there are a lot of state and local governments with fiscal concerns. And I think what's appropriate is to, at the state and local level, address those head on, as I did as a county commissioner, wrote detailed reports of exactly how to reinvent, streamline, and consolidate local government. But the federal government's role should not be to encourage that or to let that happen. I will tell you that every state and local government has dramatic revenue shortfalls. If you came into this with a sound economic situation, that has changed. Everyone is in the same boat. That's why the bill the president, one of the first bills the president signed under this, which had bipartisan, bicameral support, had $150 billion for state and local government. Why was that a bad idea? right? It wasn't. It was the right thing to do, as it would be now to provide the same sort of aid to help all state and local governments, just because the aid they provide is so important. And if it collapses down, we're all going to be in big trouble. And every state faces it, blue, red, or whatever.
Mr. Hanson, would you like to respond to that?
Well, let's not focus on Kentucky. Let's think about Chicago and Illinois. Right now, in the Illinois 5th Congressional District, Congressman Quigley, people are really upset. People are really, their kids can't go to school and get a normal education. They're not worried about Kentucky. They're not worried about the rest of the country. The fact of the matter is that they're not happy about what's happening right now. So you've got to start thinking about the 5th District.
Well, I was just comparing it to because the head of the Senate has said that this is a blue state problem. I'm telling you, it's an every state problem. I care every day about my district and work very hard. I'm just trying to explain it's a national issue.
Well, right now, Chicago is worried about Chicago and Illinois is worried about Illinois. And the fact of the matter is, you know, when Rahm Emanuel took over office in Chicago, Chicago was the 15th largest city in the world. When he left, it was 21st largest city in the world. And Illinois was the 5th largest state in the country. And now it's the 6th largest state. And people are fleeing Chicago and Illinois in hundreds of thousands. So people are worried about Chicago. They're not worried about anybody else right now. And the suburbs are worried too.
Mr. Hanson, what is Congress's role in that?
Well, Congress has to sit down with the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois to make sure that they're fiscally sound and that they're safe. And that, in the president's opinion, kids should be able to go to schools wherever they want. They should just give them the money and they can go to a charter school or a private school or wherever they feel they can get a good education.
Representative
Quigley, on the school funding issue he raised?
Look, under the HEROES Act, there's $100 billion in assistance. The interesting thing about this and decisions on where to go to school and how to go to school, whether it should be remote or a hybrid, the fact of the matter is the cost is about the same. And the HEROES Act provides $1 trillion to state and local governments to help them, with a tremendous amount of support from Republican senators, Republican governors, and Republican local heads of government, just because this is a pandemic. This will force us into one of the greatest economic downturns of our lifetimes. So the fact of the matter is it has to be addressed. The federal government plays a role. We bailed out airlines. We have bailed out other corporations. The fact of the matter is to say that it's okay to help United and American and Boeing and not help states and cities across the country is a mistake.
Well, the fact of the matter is United has left the city of Chicago. They're going back to Elk Grove. They're having a very difficult time, and so is Boeing. And you know, many of the Fortune 1000 companies are having a real problem right now because of what's happening. And like I said, you got to do the math. And the pandemic, the fear factor because of the pandemic is way over the limits right now, because the death rate is far less than what the media is trying to purport it to be, and the Democratic incumbents and politicians.
Do you believe where so COVID-19 has disrupted all facets of our lives? Do you believe that wearing masks helps protect us?
You know what? There are parts of the country that are not wearing the mask right now. There are counties that have taken off the mask. They have mandated that you don't have to wear a mask. Masks should be optional for those that feel they need to wear them and for those that don't feel they need to wear them. When you look at the math, the death rate right now of COVID-19 is a little more than a 0.5%, 94% of which have pre-existing illnesses. And yes, the major portion of the deaths are with elderly people, especially in the nursing homes. But when you look traditionally at nursing homes, the death rate in nursing homes is 13 months on the average. So right now, when you think about the economic collapse because of this fright that is really overstated, and the fact that violence has been created because of the pandemic, it's not worth the economic collapse and the fact that people are losing their livelihoods, their homes, their ability to make money.
Let me switch to another topic, and Representative Quigley, I believe it'd be your turn to go first. Given the events of recent weeks, could you tell me how deeply embedded is systemic racism in our society? How do we recognize it, react to it, and discrimination based on race, gender, religion, or other differences? And Representative Quigley, it's your turn to go first.
You know, it's interesting. I saw one of your questions was talking about, was addressing this in terms of cancel culture, I believe is how you phrased it. Let me put it this way, and I think answer your question at the same time. I was asked about the statues and the paintings that are in the Capitol. And the week before, I had purchased a replica of the Capitol made out of the Capitol itself when they were doing a rehabilitation. And it reminded us that the Capitol was built, the beacon of democracy was built by slave labor. Yet as I walked through the hallways that day, I walked past the statue of Jefferson Davis. If there is a beacon out of this darkness and the multiple crises that we face, is that it's perhaps we're beginning to appreciate and recognize the systemic racism that's existed for too long and begin to address it at every level. So in the final analysis, the answer is yes, we have a long way to go. This can't be a phase, a short period of time. It has to be something we address on an ongoing basis. And there's a significant role for the federal government to play.
Mr. Hanson?
Well, you know, the racism that exists in America is mainly in the big cities in our country. And a lot of it is because of the public schools in the big cities like Chicago, New York, LA, San Francisco, Houston. The schools don't treat the students right. There are students that are in poor neighborhoods and there are gangs. And then there are students that are in good neighborhoods and there aren't gangs. And that's where the racism exists. You know, when we talk about the suburbs, I don't see racism being a huge factor in the suburbs because, you know, mainly in the suburbs and in the red areas of the country, the conservative areas, people go to church and they respect God. And, you know, Jesus expects everybody to love everybody and forgive everybody. So racism is really a culture in the cities, the big cities across America, because the big cities across America are ungodly. You know, they've lost their faith, they've lost their morals. And this Black Lives Movement is using Black people for their own effort. You know, Black Lives Matter, their founders are self-proclaimed Marxists. They, on video, have called themselves Marxist, and that they want to defeat the US, they want to divide the country, and they want the United States of America to become a Marxist country, a communist country. So Black people are being taken advantage of. And while all this rioting is going on, Black people, 80%, are seeking police protection, and they want police to protect them. So when you do the math again, America is not a racist country. It's just the racism is really in the big, big cities where the big, big blue cities have the biggest problems.
I do want to get back to the police issue, but first, Representative Quigley on that.
I don't necessarily want to give it any credence because that's just some of the silliest thing I've ever heard. If you look at the history of the United States, to suggest that racism is stemmed from the inner cities, and that's where it only exists. Look, the zoning laws and the efforts to keep people of color out of suburbs and neighborhoods, it proves it's just one element of how off you are, and the elements that is just insane. And but I'm not going to say that the history wasn't in our own cities as well as Chicago. The redlining that exists, the force into certain areas has taken place for a long time, keeping people of color in certain areas of the city and out of certain schools, absolutely. But for a moment to suggest that it's only an urban problem is just mind-boggling.
Well, the fact of the matter is all the violence is in the big cities, in the major cities of America. You know,
That's not the
talking,
question. The question wasn't about violence. The question was about racism.
well, racism is mainly in the big cities of America. That's where it's happening the most. That's where the rioting is going. That's where the hatred is in Chicago. It's in New York. It's in LA, Houston.
Yeah, and through our history, all the lynchings took place there. They didn't take place in rural areas of the South.
Well, you know, you're so focused on history that people want to go forward. People want to go forward. And the fact of the matter is, what's happening right now is there's a great division in this country, and it's called spiritual warfare, where people are reaching out to God or they're turning their backs on God. And the people that reach up to God are not racist. And the people that are turning their backs on God, those are the racists that you're talking about. People want to move forward. We don't want to talk about history all the time. Everybody in Chicago wants to move forward. That's why you're losing touch with the 5th District, because you're not moving forward. You're not talking to your constituents.
I just have to say this. I was with John Lewis in his return to Selma and the civil rights key points of the South. And I was in 2 churches that had been surrounded by racists who wanted to kill the people in the church. Yeah, it was very Christian of them to do that. And they used their faith in such an extraordinary way that death and violence stemmed from that. With all due respect, we have to move on because this is just disgusting.
Well, the fact of the matter is the Democratic Party wants to use racists as a way to take the president down and anybody that's running in a Republican office. When you lose the facts and you don't win the office the right way, you use racism as your main argument to get reelected.
Let me add a question in here. Some are calling for significant changes in how police departments are operated and funded as a way to respond to racism. What is your opinion of that?
Well, I think the police actually need more money. And as you have seen in Chicago, the President of the United States funded the Chicago police with $66 million to pay for overtime and resources that they needed. And as a consequence of that, the Chicago police added an extra 1,000 police to quell the violence. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been a whole lot safer in Chicago than it was before all this violence began. So the fact of the matter is, you know, the president is handling that problem pretty good.
I'm not sure how the president funds anything by himself because funding bills originate in the House, as you might recall. And I would say it's important to recognize that supporting police, being concerned about crime, is not incompatible with caring about accountability. You can do both. In fact, they're both absolutely essential. So I'm an appropriator, one of 12, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. I have a long history of supporting COP grants, having additional support. So the president did nothing unilaterally. Anything that came financially to help the city of Chicago came through Congress first, was originated in Congress, and that will continue. I do think one of the changes that's necessary is the demilitarization. There was a process that began sometime after 9/11 in which quasi-military and real-life military equipment was sent to police forces, often when they were ill-trained and ill-equipped to do it. And it also sent a horrible message that our police, who are neighbors and our partners in fighting against crime, were at war with our citizens. And that's simply not the case. This does not have to be one side versus the other. You can support local police, all of our first responders. I just passed, and it became law, signed by the president, a measure dealing with first responder police suicide. I'll continue to do that. At the same time, believe that all police need to be held accountable. It is part of the job.
When you're talking about gun violence and you know the violence that has gripped our cities, what can or should be done regarding gun ownership to make people safer?
Well, what do you think?
Representative Quigley, go first on this one, and then it'll be your turn.
Look, universal background checks. I was at the Supreme Court when they argued about Chicago's gun case. And the thing that struck me when I read the opinion, they said that there is a Second Amendment right. First time they had done that. But they also said, and this was the majority conservative opinion, it said, it does not mean that it's an unlimited right, like any right in the Constitution. It said, not everyone should be able to get a gun. Not everyone should have any kind of gun they want and have it anywhere they want. Hey, I went through 2 metal detectors going to the Supreme Court. So they had some clue about the dangers there. So besides universal background checks, you really don't need a weapon designed for a theater of war to protect yourself, right? When you've got a 30-round magazine and bullets that will go through concrete walls like they did in a kindergarten classroom in this country, you weren't protecting your home. You're not shooting deer, you're hunting people. So there are reasonable limits to those rights. Not everyone, universal background checks, should be able to get any kind of gun they want, AK-47s or any kind of gun illegally transferred, and have it anywhere they want. That's just the beginning of a reasonable approach.
Mr. Hanson?
Well, you know, in Illinois and Chicago has the strictest gun laws in the country. And the real problem is illegal guns, because the fact of the matter is legal gun ownership is heavily regulated. People have to get a FOIA card. If they want to carry a gun, they've got to get a concealed carry card. And those are not easy to get. They have to take classes, and they have to carry insurance too. The real problem is illegal guns. And that's where all the killings and the shootings are going on, especially in Chicago on the south and west sides. Those are illegal guns. It was on the news this morning that the Chicago police have recovered 200 guns over the weekend, illegal guns. They've recovered 7,200 illegal guns since the beginning of the year. And honestly, when I'm elected congressman, I will sit down with the mayor and I will sit down with the governor, and I will get very close with them about the violence and the killing and the guns and the illegal guns.
Let me ask, pardon me for interrupting. Let me ask, what would you do about the illegal guns?
Well, we do have to bring in the feds, because the majority portion of illegal guns are owned by gang members, and the gang leaders are in a violation of the RICO Act. So the feds can come in and work with the Chicago police to further find the criminals who are carrying these guns and have them arrested.
And Representative Quigley?
I have no problems. I encourage. I have talked to the current U.S. Attorney to Chicago about just that very thing. Support it completely. Believe in additional prosecutions at the federal level. And a lot of the problem is illegal guns. And that old argument that, oh, Chicago has the toughest gun laws in the country, there's not much you can do about it. Obviously, we don't have walls on our borders. They come from Indiana. The guns come from the South. And that has to be stopped. I agree.
Our time is coming to an end, so let me introduce one final topic. And Mr. Hanson, if you could go first on this. What steps should the federal government be taking to address climate change?
You know, I don't believe in global warming. I don't believe in the fact that it's man-made. I think God created the earth, and I think God has given us all the resources we need to survive. So I don't believe in it.
Thank you. Representative Quigley?
I think if you were to stand on Manheim Road and close your eyes and say there are no Mack trucks, the same thing would happen to you that would happen if you say there's no climate change. President Obama said it right. This is the first generation to really feel the impacts of climate change, and the last one that can do anything about it. I'm a co-chair of the SEEK committee that addresses this. I'm endorsed by the Sierra Club for a reason. I taught environmental policy for 7 years at Loyola. There are thousands of studies that say it's real and man contributes mightily to it, and we have to do something about it. I do a climate change tour every year in national parks with experts who don't take it as a hobby to read that climate change isn't real. It's real, and it is the issue of our lifetime that will affect most future generations. And we need to all be involved. And obviously the federal role is extraordinary, hampered by a president who believes, like my erstwhile opponent, that it's somehow a hoax.
And Mr. Hanson, would you like to have a final word on that?
Yeah, you know, you're living in the wrong city if you're for climate change, because in the big cities, you're going to have pollution. And the fact of the matter is, oil is in 9 out of every 10 products that are made. So if you want to destroy the oil industry and have the green agenda or whatever you call it, then you should move out of Chicago. You should move out of Illinois. You should go out to the areas where there is no industry, because Chicago depends on industry. And as you are seeing right now, people are not going to work. And all the companies in Chicago are working at a snail's pace. And that is what trying to correct the energy business would be like if you did what you did. Our business, our industry would come to a halt. Also, we could have clean air. And the fact of the matter is, people in Chicago liked it the way it was before, and people in Chicago will like it in the future if we can get our economy back, which is industry. We need to get people back on the trains, the planes, the buses. We need to get the country moving again, and that is going to take a lot of oil. Yeah, I believe there are ways to have, to purify, like coal, like you can turn coal into liquid coal. They use liquid coal to fuel fighter jets in the military. There are ways to curb pollution and things like that. But to do this, no more oil fracking or no more U.S. energy independence, which is the goal of the Democratic Party, that's not the way to go if you want America to survive.
Quickly, fantasy and the canard that you can't grow the economy through sustainable jobs. It isn't true. It better not be true. And it ought to be a bipartisan effort.
Okay. I want to thank you both, Representative Quigley and Mr. Hanson, for participating, and good luck as we move toward the November 3rd election. Early voting begins September 24th, and that will include mail-in voting this year. We encourage all the voters to research the candidates and issues and to make use of the Daily Herald and dailyherald.com as part of that research. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay close, but not too close.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I know.